Hi, Joe.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So we've been talking about doing this for a while. Thank you for coming. I've been talking about doing a podcast for a long time,
Yeah.
and I thought it would be really cool to do my first podcast with you.
Okay.
So,
Gary Waters.
yeah. So, first of all, thanks again for doing this with me. We're not talking about anything in particular. We're just kind of a long form. That's my idea of where this podcast will go. It's just sitting here, two people talking, see what we talk about. So I guess where I'd like to start is tell me about you.
Oh, that's a
Loaded question.
loaded question.
So you're from Nebraska?
Born in Lincoln.
Okay. Lived here all your life?
No.
Where have you lived?
I have lived in Kansas. I've lived in Georgia, Germany, Texas, Connecticut, New York, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama. There's a whole lot of places I've lived.
Cool. Lots of cool places. So, growing up, did you play sports? I
was a gymnast.
Okay.
I played softball. I have a pretty mean arm.
Sweet.
I was an outfielder. And in college, I took fencing and archery. So
well-rounded athlete.
I thought it would be fun. So I can shoot you or I can stab you. So yeah.
Awesome. So do you watch sports?
I love to watch sports.
What are your favorite sports?
My favorite to watch is football.
Okay. Husker fan?
No.
Who's your team? Who's your team?
Auburn.
Your Nebraska natives here are going to go in revolt when they see this.
So I grew up watching Nebraska football. My grandfather was the mayor down there, so we had 50-yard line tickets, and I went with him a lot. Mm-hmm. When he passed, I kind of gave up the sport of Nebraska football. So
was that because it brought up so many memories?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 94, 95. Yeah. We ended on a good note, so I decided to stop being a Husker fan while we were the national champions.
You sold when the stock was high.
I did. Yep.
It hasn't been high since.
No. And they really haven't been the same since either. So, I mean,
Who's your team now?
Auburn.
Okay.
Auburn.
You watch pros?
Not so much.
Not so much. Not the same passion.
Not really. I mean, I'll watch football. If there's, nothing else going on, I just turn it on just because I like the sound of football, you know, the stands and everything like that. But I like Steelers. I know it's not a popular one.
They're pretty popular.
But
they have 6 Super Bowls.
It's true.
Yeah. We're definitely one of the more popular teams in the country.
Yeah.
Why Steelers?
It's a stupid story. My son played for the Steelers in his Pee Wee team, so that's how we kind of bonded, and he got into football. He was one of those big kids, but he was a gentle giant, so he didn't want to stay playing because he's like, I'm going to hurt someone. And I said, that's kind of your job. And he's like, what do you mean that's my job? So we watched football together and we did all that. So,
as you know, I coach youth football. I coach junior high football.
Oh.
And we always have at least one of those kids on the team, right? That's just probably head and shoulders taller and weighs 50 pounds more than all the other kids. And if you can get them to play, if you can get them to be physical, then you have something. But a lot of times they've just been told all their life, you're bigger than everybody, don't hurt anybody, and it's really hard to break that.
It's very hard. He would cry. He would come home and he would cry, and I felt so bad for him because I'm like, I know, buddy, it's okay. They've got pads. It's okay. Mm-hmm. And then one time some kid got him up underneath it and was choking him, and he goes, man, I live into him. Said, good, that's your job. That's what you do. Exactly. Like, get your pads on, we're good.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. How many kids do you have?
5.
5 kids.
5.
Ages?
So
if you don't mind.
No, not at all. I'll date myself. My oldest will be 25 this year. She was born 1995. Then Jared, the one we were just talking about, he is 22.
Okay.
And he is going to Japan here in the next couple months. Then I've got Lauren, who is almost 21. Well, she'll be 21 in November.
Okay.
Getting married in July as well. It's going to be a busy summer. And then after Lauren comes Logan, who is 17, going into the military in 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. I joined when I was 17.
Yeah. He'll be 18 in September. So he actually graduates boot camp like 3 or 4 days after he turns 18.
Cool.
So, and then my youngest is 16. He'll be 17 in October.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
I've seen pictures and heard stories about all of them. I haven't got to meet any of them yet, but you got a crew there.
I have a crew. always had people around, and now there's like no one as of July.
Tell me about Jared's Japan. What's this about?
So he's criminal justice major
Okay.
at UNO, and they offer a overseas learning experience, and you have to go through this whole huge deal. You have to have interviews, and you have to have references and all this other stuff. So he got that. He was supposed to go in March, and obviously COVID happened. So they called the day after we put the final payment down, and they said, we're canceling the trip. And he literally broke down in tears and cried. You're talking about a 6'2", 240-pound kid. Literally just started sobbing. My heart broke. And but now they're going to go back in August. So
okay.
So he's going to get to go. It's just
it's a better time of the year to go, actually.
Well, yeah, he said something about the Japanese cherry blossoms or something like that. Yeah. So maybe he'll, find them.
What part of Japan are they going to?
Osaka.
Oh, Osaka, yeah. Very good.
He'll be in Osaka.
Yeah.
For 1 year.
1 year? One whole year?
One whole year.
Wow. I'm going to be honest. I love Japan. I love to visit Japan. I would not want to, personally, would not want to live there, but I think I'm among the minority.
Yeah, he said his plan is to go do his schooling, come back, get his degree, and then go back over there and teach English and live there forever. So.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah, a lot of younger folks, especially that generation, they have a fascination with Japanese culture and like being in Japan. My little brother, he's 22. He would move tomorrow if he could to Japan. I'm quite sure of that.
Well, he's very into that anime stuff.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm so not cool. Yeah. So he's like into that anime and all the com-con and all that jazz. I'm trying to find good words for those.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yep, you got it. You nailed it. So. That's cool, yeah. So a lot of those guys are into that kind of stuff. I think that's what my brother's into. He would love to be in Japan. I feel like he's pretty jealous of my time in Japan. He's always asking questions about it and stuff, and they have these, I feel they have some misconceptions.
Probably.
I know I always talk to people about Japan. They always have this idea about Japan, like they're riding in flying cars and like they're so far technologically advanced than us. Not necessarily true. They have some things that are more advanced and more techy than us, and then they have other things you're like, really? Dude,
yeah.
It's 2020 and we can't do this? Right. My last trip to Japan, we were going into some restaurants, and a lot of the restaurants I was going in, you couldn't scan you couldn't swipe your card. Oh. Yeah, so that was frustrating.
Yeah, I heard that like you have to put the money or however you're going to pay in a tray, and then it goes over to the person, and then they take care of it from there. You don't directly hand anything to them. I don't know if that's true or not.
That is mostly true. When you do hand something to somebody, the respectful thing to do is hand it with both hands, and to receive it with both hands. It's just, this is meaningful. That's why I'm holding it with two hands. It's the way it was explained to me. I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I know they do that. Even when they're just handing you something that it would be in America very, like, yeah, whatever, here. Right. They're very careful about handing it to you with two hands. They're very respect-oriented for the most part.
For the most part. Yeah. There's always those, exceptions.
Yeah. It was fun. I had a good time, and he's going to have a great time, so that'll be cool. I'll definitely want to hear more about his experiences over there. Yeah. So you're an author.
Yes.
You have a published book.
I do.
I met you before your book was published, and we talked about it. And I have an interest in writing as well, and we kind of connected on that level and talked a lot about your writing. So you have the book Beautiful Mess.
Yep.
And it's been out since March?
March 17th.
Okay, March 17th. I got a chance to read the book. It's an excellent book. It's not a big, thick book. It's a quick, easy read, but it's a very passionate book, a very serious book, very personal issues.
Yep.
So what do you want the people out there, that all 5 of my followers, what do you want them to know about this book before they pick it up? If they haven't read it already, what's the takeaway?
The takeaway is that everyone faces circumstances in life, and they don't get to define who you are, regardless of how messy or nasty or much stigma is behind whatever it is you deal with. Everyone has circumstances that they have to overcome, and they don't define you. You get to define you.
Interesting. What brought you to that conclusion, first and foremost?
Oh, wow. Well, I have a mess of a life. So that's pretty much what did. And, so I went to this interview one time, and I do finances. And so I was sitting in the interview with this guy, and he's like going down this huge long list of personal questions, and they get really personal because, if they're going to give you a multi-million-dollar company, they're not just going to let anybody at their books,
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to answer all of his questions, whether or not I liked answering them, whether or not, and he sat back at the end of the interview and he goes, "Man, your life's really been a mess." And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty rude." In my mind, I'm like, "Thanks. I think I've done pretty good considering everything I've had to experience." And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "Most people probably couldn't handle all that." And I said, "Well, it's okay." So I get in my car and I'm driving home and I'm like, he can keep this freaking job. I don't want to work for somebody that's going to judge me like that. And my life isn't that much. You can talk to yourself in the car, and I'm sure the people next to me were like, "What is she? What? Who pissed her off?" And so I was just like, man. And as I was driving, I just felt like I heard, your life is a mess, but it could be a beautiful mess if you don't let what you've walked through define who you are, because it's not who you are, it's just what you've walked through.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has stuff. Everybody has a story. Everyone has things that happen to them that they would rather people not know about. I mean, we live in a society that likes to hide their flaws.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the photography for a second, and editing and garbage like that. Sorry, I have to put that in there.
All for the gram. Did it all for the gram, right?
And it's just kind of like, I want people to be able to be real. Take off your mask and be who you are.
Yeah.
Either people are going to like you or they're not. You're going to have both. Everybody has that. Yeah.
Social media has caused a great deal of this, I'm convinced.
Yes.
Because we all see, we get on Instagram or
Mm-hmm.
Facebook or whatever you want to talk about, and we see how good everybody's life is, and we see the vacations and the new cars and the new toys and the this and that, but we don't see those people ever struggle. Because why would you put that on Facebook or Instagram? It doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
So we have this idealized vision of what our lives should look like, and that's what I think you're getting at, is that we kind of hide the ugly.
Yeah.
Because we think we're the only ones that have it.
Right. Right. Like, okay, so what you see, this is a Facebook picture, so what you see is head and shoulders. You don't see the rest, right? So you don't see the full picture. You don't see the the things that I've struggled with in my life, the weight or the self-image issues. You don't see all that. You just see this and you think, oh, how cute, fun, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Or you see this picture that people post and it's cropped and it's adjusted and then over here you've got 5 kids that are look like monkeys, and nobody gets to see those 5 kids. They just get to see your pretty little face going, we went on a family vacation and so people live in anxiety, and they live in because they feel like they have to be something that everybody else is, when everybody else really is not what they're portraying.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good message for the world today. I think your book definitely has a place. I got a chance to read your book early, and it was awesome. I really appreciated you sharing that with me. And the first chapter, I believe, is called "What's in a Name." Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you kind of go through some of your childhood history and what your name kind of, the way I interpreted reading it is what your name means to you now.
Yes.
Because there for a while you didn't even have the right to your name.
Nope, I didn't.
So I guess I don't want to give away too much of the book, right? But how hard was it to write that kind of stuff down, knowing that anybody that pays $10 on Amazon is going to be able to read your most inner feelings and emotions?
It's scary. It's opening yourself up and being that transparent. The week before it actually came out, I was like, everybody's going to know almost everything there is to know about me. Now, there are things that I protected people in, and there's situations I didn't feel that I needed to expose people. But it's very, you're trusting people to handle the information and hear your heart, and know that all you want is them to hear your heart. I don't want sympathy. I don't need sympathy. And I write that at the very beginning of the book because I'm not a victim, not anymore. I don't want to cast a bad light on anybody else either, because that was not the intent. The intent was, this is what happened. This is how it affected me. And this is the steps that I made to correct what was wrong in my heart. In my heart, not in anybody else's. I didn't put it out there to condemn anybody. I didn't put it out there to do anything other than let people know that people's lives are not necessarily what you think they are. You can look at somebody on the outside and think they've got all of their shit together, excuse my language, but you can, and they don't.
But I have no plans of holding back with language on this podcast at all. So whatever you feel like saying, say it. I don't care.
Well, I think that it was hard. It was very, I made myself very vulnerable. So
definitely.
I did.
But listening to you explain your motivation a little bit there, I heard you say, I'm not a victim anymore. And I kind of thought that you felt like you needed to emphasize that. Why do you feel like you need to emphasize the fact that you're not a victim?
Because I think a lot of people look at stories when people are real and they're like, oh, you just want attention for the bad that happened, or, pulling on bad experiences to get a reaction from people. And that is not, and I've had a lot of feedback on my book since it's been out.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people that have been in my life that were like, I can't believe you said what you said. And, and
you didn't pull any punches.
I didn't.
You also didn't leave any names out that I know of. I mean, I'm sure you probably did. You said you protected some people, but you used real people's names, to my knowledge. Is that correct?
The only people's names I used were my father's.
Okay.
My mother's.
Okay.
Even my children don't. Their names are, but now everybody knows who they are because I just said on your podcast their names and their ages. So they were different in the book.
Okay.
I did not name.
We can fix that later if you want.
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay.
I didn't know. No, I didn't give my husband's name or anybody else's.
Okay. Yeah, I was having trouble remembering who you did mention, but there at the beginning of the book, I remember being kind of shocked about. We're just
because well, my father passed away, and so I know he's not going to care that I use his name in a book.
Right.
And what happened with him affected me tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
So his name is there, and there's no denying who my mom is, regardless of how many times you change somebody's name. She is who she is, and so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the book, you've got some interesting opportunities so far.
I do. I have lots of interesting.
You get to go travel to Barbados.
Yes.
Oh. Tell me about that trip.
Oh my gosh. So Barbados was amazing, and I don't fly well because when I was a kid, we emergency landed, and ever since then, I'm just this huge control freak and kind of like, I'm on the plane like, what was that? And they're like, it was nothing. And I'm like, I smell something. And they're like, oh my God. So anyway.
The dude next to you.
Yeah, right? You didn't shower today. What's your problem, Melissa? So I get this offer to go to Barbados. And I'm like, no one can go with me. And I'm like, wow, shit, I'm going by myself. Because I'm going, and it was an opportunity to speak to women in Barbados on a great platform. It's called Our Story, which means it's a women's encouragement, empowerment to be able to share your story openly and not hide anymore. So it's exactly what my book was. So I'm like, okay. I'm going.
Yep.
So the night before, I drive to Kansas City Airport because I had to be there at 3:30 in the morning, and I don't fly well. So I'm getting on the plane, and I don't know where I'm staying because my hotel things fell through, and the girl that I'm doing this conference with is like, well, I think you can stay with us. We're just staying in this Barbadian home, and no big deal. We'll just pick you up at the airport. And I'm like, okay, I don't know any of these people. I'm going alone, and I'm like, okay, guess I'm gonna die. I'm just gonna die today. Whatever. And get on the plane. The flight was great. There was no problems with the flight whatsoever. And I get off the plane, and it's the very beginning of the COVID situation, and so as you're going in, they're checking everybody's temperature, and if you had temperature, man, they put you back on.
Was this February? Or?
This was March 6th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they put you back on the plane, man. They're like,
Yeah.
So I passed that one, and then then you go through the regular custom or where you check in and you tell them where you're going to be staying and all this. So then I get to the next counter, and all the while I'm trying to get a hold of this girl that's supposed to be picking me up, and I can't. I have no reception. I have no connection, and I'm like, oh God, what am I doing here by myself? And is somebody going to come get me, or what's going to happen? So I go to the next counter, and I hand her my passport, and I'm not shitting you. The guy standing at the end of the counter with his gun says, "You have to take your shirt off." And I said,
"This is the camo shirt thing." Yes.
Yes. I looked at him and I laughed, and I'm like, okay. And she looks at me through the plexiglass and she goes, "No, you can't wear camouflage in our country." And I went, "Oh." And he looks at me and goes, "You have to take your shirt off now." And I'm like, okay, hold on. So I had my bags with me because it was a short trip. I reached down, I grabbed my shirt, took my shirt off, handed it to him, put on my other shirt, and I said, "Okay, we good?"
What did they do? They confiscated the shirt?
They took the shirt. Yeah, it was gone.
Wow.
He's gone. And and then they're like, and they'll probably go through your bags to make sure that you don't have any other paraphernalia. And I'm like, so I'm like hyperventilating, not internally, not necessarily externally, but I was freaking out. And I still hadn't gotten a hold of Yvonne, the girl that I was supposed to be hanging out with. And I got through customs, and I get up to this outside of the airport, and I'm just standing there. I'm like, I felt like I've been through the ringer, And all of a sudden she says, "Hey, I'm out here, and I'm in a lime shirt. Look for me." And there, you couldn't miss her because Yvonne's a very colorful personality. And so we get in the car, and we're driving through Barbados. And Barbados is a very poverty-stricken country. Very poverty-stricken. So,
just one question here for the people that haven't got a chance to travel outside of the country. You already probably shocked some people with the level of censorship that other countries have, where they're like, "No, you can't wear that shirt."
Yeah.
And they confiscated your shirt. So now you're talking about poverty. What's the feeling as you're driving through this country? You're seeing the level of poverty. What are some of the things you've seen? Because I've traveled to a lot of countries.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. I know what it's like. But some people, they haven't got to experience it. What's it look like? Paint a picture for us.
It's kind of like your worst idea of a movie. You almost feel like you're on a movie set because it's so, there's trash by the houses. Some of them don't have windows. There's people just walking along the streets with no shoes. And you just it's sombering because you think this is so not, how I live my life. Mm-hmm. And it's not the picture that everybody sees of Barbados. They see the beach. They're really,
mm-hmm.
It's all select.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into the actual, and I was kind of freaking out, not going to lie. I'm like, what kind of house am I going to be staying in? What level of poverty do these people live at,
Money in a fisherman's shanty?
I mean, I had no idea. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, dear God, Melissa, what did you do?
Mm-hmm.
And we pull up into their house, and actually, so there's this front gate, and it's got a padlock locking the gate. So they got out and they unlocked the gate with the padlock. And comes out. And we go in. And the front door also has a padlock on it with a big gate over it. And I'm like, holy cow. And I get in the house, and all of the windows have bars on them.
Big house?
It was 3 bedrooms, so it wasn't small.
Okay.
2 bathrooms, and but just totally different style of living, mm-hmm. completely different. They have their own water system for their house, and then they have all of their, she made me fresh oranges. She went out to the tree and picked out some oranges and squeezed the oranges and made me a glass of orange. I'm like, wow, that was kind of cool. But very, very wonderful people. Mm-hmm. I mean, very open people. And so she says, "Here's your room, Melissa," and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get ready for this big event because first time speaking internationally. in front of a big group of people. So I'm back in my room, and they knock on the door, like, hey, can you come out? So I go out to the living room, and there's literally this whole living room full of Barbadians, and I'm like, well, hi. And they said, we're taking you out tonight. And I'm like, wait a minute. I got, and they're like, nope.
I got a thing in the morning.
They're like, nope, we're going out. And I was like, oh, okay. So I get in a car with all these people. I'm the only white person in the entire room, which is fine, but it was different. And, you know, we show up at Oyston's. It's called Oyston's. It's this big fish place, which was really cool because it's all fresh fish, and it's really affordable. And so I had swordfish, and I had, you know.
Oh, man, that sounds amazing.
So we're sitting there, and they're like, it's initiation time. And I'm like, oh, shit, what does that mean? So they bring out the rum.
Yes.
And they're like, we're going to see how you handle this. I said, well, I'm a whiskey drinker, so I think I'll be okay. But it was a lot of rum. And it was a good time. It was a lot of fun. But, and, you know, we went over to this dance floor, and I love karaoke down there. Love karaoke. And I'm like, I smell something in the wind. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're smelling the weed. I said, is that legal here? They said, everything's legal here. And I was like, wow. So needless to say, we got in probably about 3:30 in the morning, and I hadn't even touched my speech or my, you know.
Oh, no.
And then I show up at the actual presentation, and she goes, oh, by the way, we're not going to talk about this side of your book. We want you to approach this side. And I was like, oh. So it was totally impromptu, and it was a lot of fun. I thought I was going to go minister to all these people and be a blessing to them, and they were actually a blessing to me, and pulled out a lot of things for me to grow in and just get excited about. They took me to all the beaches, and they just really were great. And now I have a place to stay anytime I want to go back. I'm staying at the same house, and I can stay there for a month. So
it's amazing.
It's a great culture. I mean, they were very welcoming. There was, you know, you wouldn't know that I was the only cracker in the joint, but I was pretty close.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, we had a good time.
So they had picked out for you what they wanted to talk about.
Yes.
Which side of the book is this that they wanted to
They wanted me to approach how the financial side, how you could be, for a lot of women in Barbados, they are in servant positions, and they're not making enough, and they don't have, and they have children, and they're single, and, you know, and so they feel trapped, and they feel like they can't become the person that they really want to be. And for me, when I got divorced, so I got married really young. Mm-hmm. I was in college, but then I stopped college because my ex-husband was in the military. And so I kind of gave up everything for him, you know, his stars in my eyes, you know, he's my Prince Charming, yada, yada, yada. And so when I got divorced and everything came on me, and having 5 children, you know, I wanted out. By the time I got divorced, I'm like, you can have whatever you want. You can keep the house, you can have the cars. I'm gone. Mm-hmm. Give me my children and we're out. So it was a struggle, being a single mom of 5 kids, mm-hmm. and working a full-time job. And then I went back to school. And so they wanted me to encourage women that regardless of what you're facing, there's hope. You can find a way to, and to do what you're passionate about. Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's going to be harder to be successful, because you're doing it out of obligation rather than want. You know what mm-hmm. I mean? So you got to have the right perspective. And that's the thing I always tell my kids. Don't take a job just because you think you're going to make money at it. Do something that you love, that you're good at, because then it's easy and it's fun, and mm-hmm. you don't even really think about it. So that was the perspective that they wanted, and I was coming in at a different one, and so I was like, oh, okay,
That's risky.
Yeah.
You got to take a risk on yourself, right?
You do, and that's the whole point. You got to believe in you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the gifts that you have, and that your gifts are different, but you can be successful. I can be totally excited for you because you're successful in your gifts, and mine are different, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So at what point did you decide you were going to take a risk on yourself?
I think it was when I divorced my ex-husband.
Okay.
Yep.
So immediately it was game on.
Well, what happened was I took a job. This is a crazy story. So I take this job. I show up at this job interview, And it's
hopefully we're going to share this with your fans. So like, people hopefully just sitting here talking, they're going to get to know you a little better.
Yeah. So I applied for this job after I got divorced, and I worked for my church for 7 years. Okay, so this was, I mean, it was a big deal for me, and it was just I was just a little bookkeeper, no big deal, $14 an hour at my church. But when I left, when I got divorced, I had to kind of leave. Just, it was very highly suggested that I find something different. So I did. So I'm going on this job interview, and it's for a construction company to be their financial person, right? And they give me this address. Well, I think it's going to be an office, and it's this dude's house. And not only is it this dude's house, but I go and I ring the doorbell, and it takes a while, and I look in the window, and there's no furniture in the house. I'm like, holy shit, what am I doing? You know? And he comes to the door, and he's like, hey. And I'm like, hey. And he goes, come on in. And I'm like, no furniture in this house. You're freaking me out.
I listened to some true crime podcasts. It sounds like
I know.
Awesome. People go missing.
I know. So I texted my friends, and I'm like, here's his license plate number, and I will let you know when this is over. I mean, I did it because I was freaked. But me, I'm too much of a bullheaded person to back down. Even though I'm scared, I'm like, well, fuck it, man. Well, I've encountered this and this and this. Well, how is this going to be that much different? So I go in, we do the interview, and he's like, that sounds awesome. I want to hire you. And I'm like, cool. And he goes, well, the office is here. And I'm like, okay. He goes, yeah, it's off my bedroom. And I went, oh, shit. Okay. So he goes, let me show it to you. And me stupidly, I'm like, game on, whatever. It was a legit company. I worked there for 3 years. He was not a legit guy, but that's a whole other, you can read part of that in my book. But so I took the job, and because I guess I just felt like I didn't have anything else left to lose. Mm-hmm. You know, I was just kind of at the point where I was like, either jump all in or give up. Mm-hmm. And I decided to jump all in. So I got set to do this job out in Virginia. And I check into the hotel at Charlottesville, Virginia, and go to my room, and I'm unpacking, and I'm like, oh, what do I do? Do I watch TV? Do I go out to eat? Do I go shopping? Do I just sit here and have a drink? I did not know what to do because I didn't have anyone telling me what to do. And I was so used to my life being structured and being told, this is how you'll be, this is what you do, this is my expectations, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, I almost froze, you know, and I'm like, okay, Melissa, you really need to figure out, what do you like? What don't you like? How do you want to see your life? How do you see your life now? How do you want to see your life? And so that was my point of no return. That was because I just literally it was very eye-opening to me. Yeah.
It's very interesting. So at that point, it seems like you probably had two directions you could have went. Mm-hmm. How did you maintain personal discipline and continue down a correct path? I'm sure you made mistakes, but you ended up at success.
I'm stubborn as hell.
Yeah.
That's probably why.
Because I don't want to get into too much of my stuff, but I know I was at that point after my breakup with my ex-wife, and that point of, I don't answer to anybody anymore. I can go do what I want, you know?
Right.
And there were times, you know, when the kids weren't here or whatever, I literally didn't have anything to come home to. And sometimes I would just stop at a bar and sit there and try to meet new people or whatever. And it was kind of, I mean, I didn't do anything wrong, but I think I could have been more focused, you know?
Yeah.
You kind of lose yourself for a while. I mean, how many hours did I sit in bars just sitting there, you know, eating junk food and drinking beers with people I don't even talk to anymore?
Right.
So how did you stay focused?
Well, I was focused for a long time. So from 2000, I divorced in 2013. So I was pretty focused up until about 2016, about midway through. Mm-hmm. And then I met somebody, and we started dating, and I was still pretty focused, but obviously it becomes less about you and more about them or the two of you together. And that relationship was ridiculous. And so after that, I think, was the hardest part for me to stay focused, because when all of that fell apart and when all the realities came out, the lies came out, the hidden agendas came out, and everything, I think that's why I'm so, you can't handle the truth, and yes, I can handle the truth. You know what I mean? There's that joke, that meme out there, and I would much rather have somebody be brutally honest than present to me what they want me to, or what they think I want to see. So after that experience, it was very difficult. I had probably about a year where I did drink a lot, and questioned a lot, and wondered a lot. But I didn't give up, because I can't. It's not in me. I wish I knew how to give up, because...
Did you struggle with your faith?
I did. I did. Because he was a leader in our church, and it was very, very
thought
hard.
that, I've read the book. I don't, again, not trying to give up too much. Thought that's who you were talking about. Okay.
Yeah, because you meet people, and you think that because they're in a certain circle of other people that they're going to be a certain way, and that's not necessarily true. And I'm a very trusting person, and I'm one of those people that what you see is what you get, and I have a really hard time comprehending or accepting the fact that everybody's not that way. I mean, and I've actually met some of the most wonderful people since then that don't have any faith, that had more integrity and more character than some of the people that I was with.
And that hurts, doesn't it?
It does. It's hard. You don't understand it. You're like,
these people that are without a faith, or sometimes atheists,
exactly,
are better Christians than some Christians you meet.
Well, and the thing is, you always hear, well, don't take the Lord's name in vain, and don't do this, and don't do that. There's all these rules, right? Well, to me, I think taking the Lord's name in vain is not just saying his name, cursing. I don't even necessarily think it's that. I think it's saying, hey, guess what? I represent God, and then you go out and you do everything opposite of what God represents. And what does God represent? He represents faith. He represents hope. He represents forgiveness, truth. And those are the things that, if you're going to say, hey, I follow God, you better have those under your belt, man. And it's not about whether or not you curse, and it's not about whether or not you drink, and it's not about making mistakes. It's about what is in your heart. Who are you really? And it's not, I struggled. It was a real challenging time for me in my faith. And God and I are good, but I don't really attend church or organized religion. I don't know if I should say that or not, but I don't.
No, I mean, it's a conversation to have, right? Because I think your book is faith-based.
It is.
It should help people with these kind of questions. I struggle with my faith sometimes, as I think anybody that's honest with themselves does. But I think more than struggling with God or struggling with my faith, I think I struggle with the people, right? Because people are people, like you're getting at. So I just try to remind myself that you're upset with people, you're not upset with God.
Right. Right, and it's not his fault. Everybody has free will. And that's one of the biggest things that I learned. So being in the church, and I was in the church for years, like I grew up basically from the time I was 10 until, now, but I'm not really, I wouldn't say that I'm in the church now, but I worked for the church. I was one of the pastor's assistants. Like, I'd go to their house and we'd clean because, and there were just all of these, if you do this, then this is going to happen. If you do this, then this is going to happen. And if you act this way, then this is going to happen, good or bad, and all of the name it, claim it, saying. And so when I was going through my marriage, and I wanted it to work, I obviously anybody who gets married wants it to work, but I desperately needed it to work because of everything I'd experienced growing up. And I wanted my life to be different. And I thought if I prayed enough and if I did this right and I did that right and everything else, it would all come out in the end. And it didn't. And I'm the one that made the choice. I'm the one that left. He would have stayed. But I use that term loosely because you have to be faithful in order to have something. So at any rate, I had a conversation with God after that, and I'm like, I did everything right. I did everything by your book. I did XYZ, 1, 2, 3, whatever algebraic problem there is, I did it, and it didn't work out. And I very clearly heard, man has free will.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot make somebody be a certain way. You can't make somebody want something to work. You can't, no matter how much you will it, no matter how much you do right, there's always two people.
Mm-hmm.
And if that other person doesn't want what you want and doesn't believe what you believe or want to invest what you want to invest, it's never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my aha moment, if you will, was like, oh shit, you mean there's somebody else? I can't control somebody else with my action? Not that you really think you're trying to control somebody, but you kind of like, I was always taught that if you did all the right things, all of the right things would happen. And that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I think I can relate. I think I had, when I was younger, this idea of a formulaic life that you just do this, this, and this, and it adds up to this, which is obviously not the case because there's other people involved in your life.
Right.
So,
darn those other people.
Right. I grew up, my grandparents were Southern Baptist, and they were preachers, both of them, in the Southern Baptist church. And so early on, I had a lot of what now my whole family calls religion, right? And when we say religion, we don't mean it in a positive way. It's just,
right.
I'm not going to pick on anybody else's faith right now, but just people come up with these rules that aren't necessarily scripture-based and Christian and the Christian belief. And our family started moving away from a lot of that and just being like, look, what's the scripture say about this?
Right.
So, and then also kind of coming to an understanding that these same people that are telling you about your sins, they sin as well.
Right.
Right? So you don't have to be kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of this, hiding all your flaws, I think, is something really dangerous about those religious groups that are frowning on everybody. Yeah. We should all have an understanding that we all sin. We all fall short of the glory of God, right? So,
right.
I think it's way more healthy to understand that we all sin, talk about our sins, and understand that we're all forgiven, right? I don't want to get too religious on here, but that's just what I've learned, and I appreciated and kind of got that from your book as well. So it's cool. That's definitely a cool perspective that you bring from all your experiences and history in the book. So you get to go to Barbados. You're getting to do all these cool interviews, and now you're doing an interview with some guy in Plattsmouth, Nebraska, in his house, and it's probably seen by like 60
furniture,
people. Yeah, right.
He went up to the other guy, so we're good.
Her next interview is Courtney Love. Right? Like,
June 2nd.
That's cool. That's awesome. You're getting to do all these experiences. What's it like?
Well, it's weird because you don't expect something to go off. I guess your expectations are never what you think they're going to be, whether it's good or bad, and so I didn't really expect to get this much of a response or this much feedback or this many people coming and saying to me, hey, I want to hear you. I want to hear what you have to say. I want a piece of your wisdom, or I want, some encouragement, or, whatever. It's humbling. Mm-hmm. It's very humbling. And my desire is to be as real as I can be in my life with my friends and in my life on camera. I don't want there to be this separation of, oh, I'm going to be this way when I'm over here, and I'm going to be this way when I'm over here, and because you know what? Eventually, one day, all those are all going to come together, mm-hmm. and you have to pick who you're going to be. So why not just be who you are?
Yeah, that's so true.
So it's humbling. It's exciting. I'm glad it's happening now because all of my children are gone, and so I can actually travel and do the things that I want to do. I was telling a good friend of mine, I said, it's kind of fun because, not that I want my kids to leave because I don't. I'm very, very close to my children. But it's like, woohoo! I get to go, and I'm going to London and South Africa and back to Barbados. And, I just get to meet some really great people,
Yeah.
and I'm thankful for the people that I meet along the way. You know, the people in the airport. You know, they all got to see Melissa. You know, I was like, God, I hope I never see you all again. So, good thing I wasn't wearing my camouflage pants, because that would not have been as much fun.
Oh my!
Because I do have a pair, and I love them.
Yeah.
Everybody jokes with me because I have a camouflage hat, and I'm just not that I'm a country girl or anything.
Nobody gave you the briefing.
No one, and actually the flight attendants should have. Everyone that travels down there were like, "Your flight attendant," she said something to you. I'm like, no, they didn't. Maybe they wanted to see what happens to this cute little blonde girl as she runs through the airport with no shirt on. I don't know. I was like, wow, it's crazy.
That's so funny. So you have any other big things coming up? Big opportunities that you're excited about? I know I mentioned Courtney Love. I'm
really excited. I'm excited about Jack Canfield. I'm doing a conference with Jack Canfield in November. I actually get to speak right before him. It's like
awesome.
A 3-day conference, and he wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, so like he's So I'm really excited to get to be on the same stage as him, even if it's before we're really not. Maybe we might pass each other and be like, hey. He probably won't even know who I am, so it won't matter. But that's exciting to me. That's coming up. I have my other book will be out in September, Uncommon Love.
Uncommon Love.
Uncommon Love.
Give us a brief synopsis.
Uncommon Love is about being present in people's lives. And it's the different forms of love that we don't necessarily consider love, or that we don't, it doesn't jump out and go, ooh, this isn't romantic, or this isn't, whatever. So there's stories based off of people that I know. There's 7 different scenarios, and then I talk about the different type of love that they expressed to me. And so it's 270 pages, so it's bigger than this.
Quite a bit bigger.
Quite a bit bigger. It's like 3 times the size. It was more exciting to write about that, because I'm passionate about love.
I remember talking to you some late nights when you were writing. You would text me and you would tell me about some of the stuff you were writing. We talk a little bit. I've shared some of the stuff I write too, but it's so exciting to kind of see how you're doing this as a published author, because someday I would like to be a published author. So it's really a benefit and a privilege to kind of get to see the inner workings and all the cogs going.
Well, there's a lot you don't know until you get into it, and then you're like, oh, well, somebody could have told me that. Well, so I mean, not bad, but just things you don't anticipate.
I forget the dude's name. I'm going to have to look this up, and somebody will probably jump on the comments and tell me, but Joe Rogan just had a guy on who is he's a published author now, and I think he's on like his 5th book, and he was kind of talking about the same thing. He wanted to be an author since he was a kid. He joined the SEALs. Did the military thing, and like he had a plan his whole life, and he just kind of fell into getting a chance to get his book seen, and now he's doing really well for himself. And he said a lot of the same things that you're saying. It's like, dude, it's not what you expect. And he also was saying that he kind of got lucky, because you're supposed to have an agent before you find your publisher and all this stuff. He kind of did it the opposite, which right. I'm leading into that. So how did this happen to you? How did you get a book published?
Well, what's so crazy about it was I was doing like a self-publishing thing with just this little small company, and I was like, okay, and it's pay as you go, Well, one day I get this phone call, and I didn't recognize the number, and so I didn't answer it. And I listened to the voicemail, and it was somebody from Trinity Broadcast Network. And I was like, whatever, I'm ignoring that. That's a scam. So then I get a text from the same number. This is so-and-so from Trinity. I'm calling about your book. And I'm like, okay. And I still ignored it. And then I get an email, and I was like, okay. And they're like, we want to see your book. And I was like, okay. So I sent it to him, and actually I only sent him the first 3 chapters. I didn't send him the whole thing.
Right.
And within a couple of days, I think I got it to them on November 3rd. By November 6th, they were like, we have a contract for you if you want to sign it. So by November 7th, I had a signed contract with all of everything that they were going to do for me, and I was just floored, because they advertised for me. They did all the editing. They they designed the book cover. I actually had a different cover than that final one. It was my daughter.
You did, yeah.
I did.
I saw the original.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw some other versions of this.
Yeah.
You landed on that one.
I did. Because I liked the picture of my daughter because she was walking across the rocks. But the picture of her actually showed her actually being like, she was doing something. But the one that they did seemed more like staged.
Yeah.
And this felt more real to me. And that's what I wanted. So, yeah.
I like that cover.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We talked about your covers when we were going through this, and I got to see some of the other pictures.
Yeah.
And there was one other one that I liked, but it was between this one and the other one, and this one's great. Yeah, I think you made a great choice.
Thanks. So I have Uncommon Love, September, and then I have the potential for a book deal, which is 5 books as a contract, which is a whole different story.
Are they all going to be nonfiction, or are you going to dip into some fiction?
I might dip into some fiction.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
What kind of genre would your nonfiction?
Oh, come on, it's got to be about love, man.
Okay.
What girl doesn't write about love? Either that, or maybe I should write a murder. I mean, I've had enough weird experiences.
Murder mystery. There you
I
go.
could do murder mystery, or a whodunit. I loved Angela Lansbury growing up. But
I was just thinking about her. I was just thinking about some murder mystery.
Yes. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
My thing is love. It's just because that's just kind of been what I think got me through everything.
That's awesome.
So.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but I don't know if I could do 50 Shades of Grey or not. I don't know. I might.
Do you want to?
No.
Would Trinity be okay with that?
No, I wouldn't be with them. With somebody else. The book deals with somebody else.
Okay.
No, somebody completely different. And I might need a little bit more homework to do something like that too. So, okay, we need to change the subject.
Right.
So, I don't know.
That's cool. That's awesome. I hope you get your 5-book deal, and that would be amazing to see what you do. And
well, I have a good friend who was on a boat for 7 weeks during the quarantine, and I would love to write about that. And I've been trying to convince, but I don't know if I succeeded or not. I know. It's an amazing story.
What do you think about all this COVID stuff?
Oh, do we really need to talk about it?
We don't have to.
Okay,
I'm just saying. Like, I want to say this. I think, I'm going to make this generalized statement. Okay. I think you're crazy if your ideas about COVID haven't at least changed once or twice during all of this. Because my ideas at the beginning were not what they are now, and they've evolved overall through the changes and all the information that's coming out. And I can't make up my mind, to be honest, whether I think we're doing too much or too little.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line to walk, I think, because you don't want to negate people's health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
You also don't want to negate
freedom, liberty,
and the economy, and doing things that are actually going to, you can only give so many stimulus checks to people.
Yeah.
I mean, and then we're not going to have any more money, and then we're going to be a bankrupt country, and then, and I know people will be like, well, it's worth it for people to be healthy. But on the flip side of that, you have, 2% out of everybody that even ever gets it actually having a problem with it. And so that's where you kind of have to do the balance. And I'm not saying that lives are not important at all. That definitely not. My nephew has recovered from leukemia, so they have to be very, very cautious.
Yes.
And I think that out of respect for people, if it makes somebody feel comfortable for you to wear a mask, put the freaking mask on.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt you. You may not like it. You may think you look dumb, and you probably do look dumb. I think we all look dumb. I looked at the aisles, and I'm like, we all look like a bunch of weirdos. I mean, we just do. I mean, let's be real. You look stupid. Yeah. But the thought behind it is to protect others. And I don't think everybody's, I would personally like to think, I could be mistaken, but I would like to think that most people aren't just thinking about themselves when they put on that mask. They're thinking about everybody else.
I think we've shown that as a country, right?
Yeah.
I think for the most part, everybody's been pretty awesome. We really stomped the curve, I think. I was talking to my buddy the other day who's in public service. I'll leave it at that. And he said that we never surpassed as a nation 80% of our capacity for hospitals. Of course, some local areas had surpassed that. But
Sure.
that's awesome that we were able to stomp that curve down. But when is enough enough? I don't know the answer to that. Elon Musk seems to think it's time. He was on Joe Rogan the other day.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, look, if we don't make stuff, there won't be stuff.
And there's some validity to that too. So I think that there has to be some wisdom. There's a balance, you know. And I think it's the key thing in life really is balance. It's like not one extreme or the other. I think that when you go to one side or to the other, you know. And I always grew up a very black or white person. And when I say black or white, I mean like no spectrum of color in between. It's like either it's right or it's wrong.
Yep.
Either you do this or you don't. You know. And I've learned over time that there's lots of colors between the black and the white.
Yeah.
And they're not all wrong. They're not all right, but they're not all wrong. And it's just the balance. It's finding balance.
Absolutely. I've learned that over the last, I've always known that, I guess, but I feel like I've come to a better understanding of that over the last 2 years probably. I read Jocko Willink's book, Dichotomy of Leadership, and it's pretty much all about balance.
Nice.
It's a fantastic book if you get a chance to get your hands on it. It's actually the sequel to Extreme Ownership. Great book. But yeah, it's all about that balance. Finding the balance
Very cool.
is key, right? So
Yeah.
hey, we've been talking for a while, I think.
Yeah, I need a drink.
Yeah. Maybe a real one, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's get a real drink, and thank you so much for talking to me.
Yeah.
This is awesome. This is gonna be a really cool episode to start out my podcast.
So let's hope it goes well.
Right. Now I just got to work hard and keep on this, and maybe we'll get something going. Maybe I can have you back on another episode someday.
Sounds good.
Are you going to get in trouble for cursing?
I don't know.
Do I need to bleep words out?
No, I'm real. That's who I am.
Right? Like,
It's just real.
it doesn't mean you're not a Christian.
It absolutely does not. 100%.
Because if it did,
There'd be a lot
I'd
of
be in
people
trouble.
never making it. So I think that.
all right. So what I'm going to do is I'll get all your information for hyperlinks and all that. I'll put this on the YouTube page so people can go to your Amazon and go and buy your book and check out your webpage. You have a blog, right?
I do.
Yeah. So we're going to put it on the blog. We'll put your blog address on there. We'll put all your information up there so people can click on it. More than likely, the 5 or 6 people that I'll send your way, I'll probably get more back in return because you have way more followers than I do, which I appreciate.